Hey, would you like to know how to improve your vision at any age and get rid of your reading glasses and even your contact lenses? My guest on this show is a vision coach who's been helping her clients restore their vision naturally using a set of relaxation techniques and exercises that you can do from even the comfort of your home. And yes, you totally can reverse your vision. It's possible. This is a really cool episode. I think you'll enjoy it. Hey, are you looking to get thicker, fuller, and stronger hair? Then make sure to check out fullyvital.com. The team has come up with 4 different natural and vegan products that help stimulate hair follicles from 4 different ways to really get thicker and healthier hair that you deserve. So make sure to check out fullyvital.com and enter the code anti-aging hacks for 15% off your purchase. Are you enjoying the videos on this channel? Then please make sure to hit the subscribe button down below so you can get notified when we release new episodes. Our goal on this channel is to help you look and feel younger and reverse your age so you can live your best life. So make sure to hit the subscribe button down below so we can notify you when a new video gets released. All right, let's get on with the episode. Hello and welcome back to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast. Today, my guest is Claudia Muehlenweg, who began wearing glasses at a young age and always disliked them. She even got bullied for wearing them at a time when glasses were not considered cool or in any way fashionable. After working to improve her own eyesight, Claudia founded Holistic Vision LLC to help others. Her work is based on the Bates method. She focuses on finding the root cause of blurry vision instead of using symptomatic treatments like glasses, contacts, or surgery that can help actually make eyesight worse in the long term. So with that said, Claudia, welcome to the Anti-Aging Hacks podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Faraz.
So tell us your story. How did you get into helping people with vision of all things?
Yeah, so like you already mentioned, I got my first pair of glasses at the tender age of 3 years old, and they made my life miserable. I mean, first of all, I was born in the 60s, and back then no other kid had glasses. And, you play, you run around. So once I started school at 6, I was bullied, I was teased, I really had no friends. And back then there wasn't nerd, there wasn't anything cool, like nothing was cool about glasses. And I also wasn't a smart kid. So I wasn't like the, professor type. And funnily, and I was not aesthetic at all. In fact, I had a squint, I was farsighted, so I was, bumping, I had problems with depth perception, I was bumping into things. And then interestingly enough, somebody asked me if I wanted to be on the girls' handball team at age 12. And I know they literally didn't have anybody. So they literally asked everybody because I was like, why do they ask me? So I ended up doing that. And after 3 years, and I wasn't able to wear my glasses. That was the key thing. So the coach said they were actually glass back then, right? They weren't like plexi or something. So, and in hindsight, what I think happened is the sunlight, the playing around, the moving, the throwing and catching, the peripheral vision helped me, because after 3 years, I went to the eye doctor. I had to go every year. And he said to me, your eyes are normal. I'm like, what? And I was just 15. That was the perfect time. And I went from like ugly, four-eyed, to you have beautiful eyes and, you're a girl and then teenager. And then I noticed a couple of years later, I was in my high school exams. We have 13 years of high school, at least back then. And I noticed my vision was getting blurry, really blurry. And I was super stressed. I had to study and study. And I was so horrified that I got back into glasses because I just tasted the freedom. And I found one book, and I had to, back then you had to look at bookstores. I found one single book written about natural vision improvement. And I read that book and I applied the practices and it helped. And everybody was laughing at me and I was like, this doesn't work. But I continued to use these practices, and I was glasses free in my 20s. I went to art school. I loved it. My life was good. And then in my mid 30s, I married, difficult marriage, ended in divorce. And in my late 30s, I was back in glasses, and now know that it's related to stress. But long story short, after wearing them for a few years, I had this epiphany one night. I came home from a party. I was already separated. And I really felt lonely. I felt disconnected from people. I just turned 40 and I took the glasses off. I actually got lost on the way home. I live in LA. So I got lost on the way. Back then you had the Thomas Guide. If anybody lives in LA, of your listeners, that map with teeny tiny print. No, nowadays nobody knows that anymore. I couldn't see a thing. And I finally made it home. And I took the glasses off and I realized my vision was always so blurry when I took them off, way worse than before I put them on. And I thought to myself, this is not right. This doesn't feel good. And that night, 1 a.m., I dug through my whole stuff and I found that book. And I went back to practicing, but eventually I needed help because at that point I really needed a coach to help me. And that's the story. And I've been glasses free. I'm going to be 62 next week. So I'm glasses free like since almost 20 years.
It's all natural. You don't have any Lasik. You haven't done any surgeries or anything.
Nope.
Wow. That's beautiful to hear. And so you use this technique that was described in a book early on in life to get normal vision. But later on, you said you needed the help of a coach. What is the methodology or the method or the practice that you were following with the book or with a coach?
So basically, it's based on what we now know from neuroscience. First of all, we see in the brain. We don't see in our eyeballs. Eyes are actually, the retina is a part of the brain. So the retina part of the brain is actually part of the neural circuit of the brain. And also vision habits. So it's vision habits and then it's stress reduction. So the Bates method is really all about relaxation, but not relaxation of just the eyes. It's relaxation of the mind and the body. Because that's when I noticed in my high school exams, I was really stressed. Yes, I was spending a lot of times reading books and looking up close, which is, we can talk about that. But that alone is not necessarily a reason that you have vision problems. But I was stressed. I was worried. I was afraid I'm not going to pass the exams. And so it comes down to that relaxation. And the book really taught me these natural vision habits that people have with good vision. They naturally do them. And then you practice them. Like one of these simple things is blinking. Like I was staring, and people with poor vision, if you watch the video, you see me stare. I'm not blinking, I'm staring, and it actually hurts my eyes now. I can't do it. I used to be really good at that. And so little techniques like that, like relaxing my jaw. I used to have very tight jaw. So, I work with the body. That wasn't so much in the book, but just kind of like movement, light. So the sunlight is a big piece of the method because think about it. Eyes are light receivers, right? Like how ears are sound receivers. And if we are sensitive to light, which I was, then there is a problem with the refraction of light. So you can't really, how can you see perfectly if you can't tolerate light? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that's kind of the short version.
Okay, gotcha. So as people get older, we normally see them wearing glasses. And so we tend to associate age with being, with glasses. And that's an ageist stereotype, I agree. But that's what the vision that comes to me is I saw my older uncles and aunts all wearing glasses. And I thought, that's what happens when you turn old. So isn't it normal to lose your vision or not have good vision as you age? And what age does that start to really go downhill?
So first of all, we call that presbyopia. That's known as old age sight, or when you start readers. Yeah, to me, it's not normal. It's very common. And it's very common. And yes, as we get older, we get wrinkles, things. It's to me, it doesn't make sense to pretend nothing happens as we age, right? Of course. However, it doesn't mean, because you also see people in their 70s, 80s, 90s that don't need glasses to see, that can read small print up close. And I notice and this is not the only thing, but I noticed a connection with people that have a life purpose, that have a vision, that are excited to get out of bed every morning, compared to those that are like counting down the days to retirement, right? Where it's like, or like we talked about living in Germany, where it's like Monday, how are you? You have to, like, kind of that kind of drudgery of like living your life, but not really enjoying life, mm-hmm. to the, so that's what I would say. But yes, the body changes. Joints get stiffer, they say the lens gets stiff, but then that's not really that doesn't make sense. And that has never been proven. However, there is, like sometimes I also notice that, especially if you're farsighted, which is presbyopia as a term of farsightedness, meaning you see better in the distance than up close. Sometimes you also don't want to look at these things. You don't want to look at stuff that's close to you. You kind of project more out in the world, and you don't really want to look at your own life, and it's easier to complain about everything else. And I'm not saying everybody does that, but there is a less of a willingness to actually look at yourself and look up close, and more of a tendency to be out in the world. And that's also like kind of a characteristic or personality trait of people that tend to get that old age side. And the normal, what they usually say mid-40s, but again, I work with I have 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds, 90-year-olds that one of my friends passed away a couple of years ago, not from COVID, but in 2020. He was born in 1919 during the Spanish flu and died when COVID just started. And he was 100 years old, and I saw his iPhone and he could read everything, and he never had glasses. His parents had glasses. So again, normal and common is not the same thing.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. A few years ago when I was living in LA, I saw some floaters in my eyes one day, and I said, you know what, I should go get my eye test. I haven't done it in a while. So I went to go and see an optometrist. I believe it was in Burbank that I've got an appointment. And so I went to go see this doc, and then she did the eye test, the eye exam, whatever they put in your eye, it makes your eye open up really well. And so you can't really drive for a while. But after we did the test, she said, congratulations, you have 20/20 vision. And I said, thanks, that feels great. So no problem with the floaters. And she goes, no problem, don't worry. But when you turn 40, everything's going to go downhill. I said, what? She's like, yeah, it happens to everybody. Sorry to break it to you. I go, I don't want that to be me. So I wonder if there's options out there. And I never really looked into it in much detail because thankfully my eyes are good. But just putting that fear of God at 40 years old, your eyes are going to fail you, was just something that I couldn't believe she was saying to me. So it's really interesting. And you also mentioned that I think 40, 45 is when people start to see age-related declines in eyesight, correct?
Yeah, and I would love to say something to what you just shared. So there's several things that you just shared. First of all, and now that you know, and we didn't talk about that much, but your vision varies for everybody. Even if I have 20/10 vision, if I'm stressed, if I was in an accident, if something like horrible happened, your nervous system will blur your vision. Your pupils dilate, just like in the eye exam where they put atropine in your eyes to look at your retina, right? They dilate, your peripheral vision shuts down. So when you're in shock or stress, everybody's vision is worse. I might only see 20/40, 20/50 when I'm really stressed, even though my vision is usually 20/10, 20/15. So that's normal. Now, who has ever found an eye exam relaxing? You're already sitting there. You're already probably holding your breath. You're like, oh God, I better pass this test. It's stressful. Then they put you in a dark room nowadays. It's usually not like the old days with a Snellen chart because print is actually easier to read. Nowadays, it's dark room. Your pupils are already dilated, which is harder to see, right? We have more acuity during the daylight when it's bright and the pupils are small. So, and then it's a mirror reflecting the letters. So you're already in the most unfavorable conditions during an eye exam. And then the doctor tells you, like horrible, you said, like they kind of put that in your head. There's nothing you can do. This happens to everybody. Mm-hmm. And the mindset is a huge piece, the mindset and how you feel about the future. So I just wanted to say that this is so common, and it just makes me angry because they could also be more supportive and be like, keep it up. Or sometimes I had clients that did my method and they came back to the eye doctor and their vision was improved, a diopter 2 or 3 diopters better. And you know what the doctors oftentimes say? Oh yeah, no, that doesn't work. I must have measured wrong the first time. And I was like, wow. In that case, I would say you measured wrong, but you still told me I need to wear those glasses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I agree with you. I totally believe in the psychosomatic connection between mind and body, and how that's so important to always tell yourself positive, affirming things, as opposed to, it's going to happen to everybody. It happens to everybody, so it's going to happen to you. I don't buy into that. Okay, so let's get one thing out of the way. Is a loss in eyesight or impairment in eyesight related to genetics in any way, or is it just lifestyle and age related?
I mean, I'm not a genetic expert, and I'm 100% sure that there is a genetic connection, especially, we have certain eye disease, we have certain markers for macular degeneration. So there is definitely a genetic component, especially, babies can be born with cataracts, or, a friend of mine had juvenile macular degeneration. That's an inherited trait, and her son has it too. So, you lose your central vision at some point at an early age. With refractive errors, and refractive errors are those like nearsighted, farsighted astigmatism, where it's about how your cornea and your lens bend the light and refract it. Those are less, I would say, to a very little degree genetic. There probably is some component. But what I see more likely is that kids copy their parents' behavior. So if the parents are already bookworms, if they reward you for staying indoors, which we can talk about sunlight in a moment, how important that is for eye development and brain development. But, if you're kind of in that high pressure cooker environment at home, so a lot of times there's more that copying, or even if the teacher wears glasses, right? The students are more likely, the kids are more likely, because when my kids were little, I never said that as a kid. My daughters were like, we want glasses, we want braces, we want a cast, because you want to be like, you want the attention of your classmates, right? So there was a phase where my daughters wanted glasses. I'm like, oh my God, why would you want glasses? But you know what I mean? So I think a lot of times it's more copying behaviors or personality characteristics that get passed on. And there's more of a higher risk for like nearsightedness if you're like that introverted, shy kid that likes to be inside. That's more like you want to be in your little bubble, versus the extroverted tomboy that climbs on trees. You know what I mean? So that's definitely a personality correlation, but it's not like cookie cutter. I would never say everybody introverted is going to get nearsight. It's not that simple.
Gotcha. Okay, so there's these two cells in the eyes. They're the rods and the cones. And from what I understand, the rods are what are stimulated by, or the cones are stimulated by light, and the rods they just do peripheral vision, right? So is it these cells that go bad as well, along with the lens and whatnot, or it has no relation to rods and cones as we get older?
No, this is a great question. So basically, you're right. We have rods and cones, and the cones are the cells that work with light, and they also see color. And in the macula, which is the center of, there's the fovea and there's the macula, the center of the eye. So if you have macular degeneration, you're losing that central vision. And that's the only vision, the only area of our retina where we have perfect clarity. It's the size of a pinhead. It's a tiny, tiny spot where we have perfect clarity. And then as you go further out from the center, there's a mix of rods and cones. And in the outer periphery, we only have rod cells. And the rod cells, very light sensitive. That's why at night, you only, when it's really like just maybe a little bit of a moon, there's no street light, we only have the rod cells. And that's why we have no color perception at night. So our vision at night is pretty crappy. In FBI movies, you always see those night vision goggles. We don't see if you're in a cave and there's no light, you see nothing. We see nothing. We need to have at least the moonlight or some kind of light. But the rod cells are 100,000 times more light sensitive than the cone cells. But they notice in the periphery, you notice movement first. Movement, and then that's why at night, pilots have actually better vision in the periphery, because again, if it's dark at night, your central vision, that you don't see anything exactly in the center. Where during the day, or even if you have candlelight, as long as you have some light, you see better in the center. You see sharper, and so those cells can also deteriorate. And we know now that the mitochondria, so the mitochondria, the little batteries that every cell has, the retinal cells use more energy than any other cell in the whole body. And research by Glenn Jeffrey at the University of London, they published a study in 2020, and that found that near infrared and infrared light helps rejuvenate those mitochondria. So as we get older, those batteries, I always say like a battery in your phone or whatever in your car, right? They kind of lose some power eventually, but they found that the red light therapy has actually rejuvenated the mitochondria so that the cells function better. So that's one thing. The other, so light, and that's by the way included in sunlight. So when you get sunlight, you get all those beautiful infrared light rays. And then the other aspect is nutrition. So obviously the macula, where we see the sharpest, is covered in plant pigments called lutein and zeaxanthin, which when you buy eye vitamins, and those are in marigolds and dark leafy greens and egg yolks. So you can find, but if you eat a poor diet where you don't get any of those things, you're at a way higher risk for macular degeneration, because we can't produce those ourselves. We have to get them from the food. And then night vision, or the rod cells, the famous carrots, right? The famous carrots. So beta carotene, which is a precursor to vitamin A. Vitamin A is only found in animal foods. That gets transformed metabolized into rhodopsin, and that's the plant pigment covering the rod cells, which give us that night vision. So again, if you eat a poor diet, if you don't get those nutrients, your night vision will also deteriorate. So absolutely, there's a connection to that too.
Okay, great. Okay, awesome. So let's talk about, I want to get to some of the solutions you're talking about. Before that, what's wrong with getting LASIK or just using corrective glasses forever, I guess? What's wrong with that, those two approaches?
So none of them address the root cause of blurry vision, and we haven't really we talked a little bit about stress, right? So the problem is, and I call them corrective lenses, and I always, connect it to or compare it to, you break your arm, right? You get a cast for like what, 3-4 weeks. I've never broken any bone, thank God. But you get a cast, and then after that, your muscles are a little atrophied, but your bone is corrected. It's back like corrected. Then you get some physical therapy or whatever, and then you do strength exercise, and eventually you're back to normal, right? To before. Now, corrective lenses don't correct anything, because the second you take them off, your vision might actually be worse, like my experience. So they don't correct anything. They only keep you dependent on them. They don't change anything. And in fact, because the strain, the root cause behind the blurry vision is still there. And that's why you end up getting into stronger and stronger and stronger glasses. And LASIK, so now that you know that vision varies, right? That vision based on the nervous system for everybody, your vision goes like up, like your blood sugar, your blood pressure, your heart rate, your vision also is not this kind of fixed, thing that we think like fix your eyesight, like as if it's like a camera you fix and then it's perfect. So it changes. And when you get LASIK, first of all, it's based on the measurement of that day. So maybe, you went to the eye doctor in the next week and you had a really stressful day and, things went wrong and, whatever, your girlfriend broke up with you. I don't know, something horrible happened. And then the doctor said, oh, you have 20/40, you need glasses. You can't drive without glasses. So now you have glasses and now your vision will tank. So LASIK is based on that measurement. And then you cannot ever, I recommend, and we haven't talked about this yet, but I recommend that people wear glasses for like the diopters only correct you from one distance. So if you're nearsighted, you get LASIK. Now you're corrected for 20 feet for driving. But when you sit all day on the computer at 2 feet, that's way too strong. And as you get older, so basically you can't change it. And your cornea is not, virgin, so to speak. Now you have a cut in your cornea. So there's a higher risk of corneal diseases. There's a high risk of light sensitivity, of halos at night, dry eyes, very common with LASIK. So the longest I've ever heard where it works was like 12 years, but I've also talked to people that after a year they were back in glasses. So it's not, there is no permanent solution that's a quick fix, so to speak.
So LASIK, you're saying people will revert. They'll go back to their previous impairment that they had in the eyes, or the not loss of vision, but the myopia or presbyopia or whatever else they were experiencing, nearsightedness, farsightedness, they will go back to that over time. It's not going to fix it forever.
Yeah, I mean, so let's say when you're nearsighted, and for those of you listening, I have a plastic eyeball in my hand and I'm squeezing it so it looks like an oval. So when you're nearsighted, your eyeball is elongated. So now when you work with natural methods, you can actually get the eyeball, because it's a soft, squishy eyeball, and it's surrounded by strong muscles. But if you get the LASIK now or the glasses now, this is locked into place because now you have that correction. So what happens is not necessarily that people get that everything goes back to let's say you had -5 diopters. It's not like you go necessarily back to -5. You will eventually lose some of that for sure, because people then need glasses again for driving. But what I usually see happen with nearsightedness is that what we talked earlier, that kind of old age sight. So now, let's backtrack. Let's say they were younger and they had -5 contacts or whatever, they could still read, because reading up close is a muscular effort in your eyes. It's an effort of about 3 diopters to look up close. So for the eyes, the lens, looking up close is a muscular, it's like flexing your biceps versus having a relaxed distance is relaxed, right? So now as you get older, you have that -5 engraved on your cornea. And now that additional effort to look up close, if you took your contacts or your glasses off, which you can't do with LASIK, you can still read perfectly fine up close. But now you have that engraved. And so now people need to put like +2 or +3 readers on top to lower the minus that's engraved on their cornea. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
And I've worked with people with LASIK and I help them to get back to 20/20. But basically, you're not starting from ground zero. But it doesn't mean that you're lost cause. It doesn't mean that there's nothing you can do, for sure.
Okay. So let's come back to something you mentioned early on, was stress in your nervous system, in your physical body, and how that can affect your vision from a moment to moment basis. I did not know that this was even happening, meaning if you were stressed, you could test for something else in your eye exam. So I guess, how can people take that, learn that stress can cause worse eyesight temporarily, and use that in their normal life to improve their vision?
So I call this strains and gains. And I say, become very clear, just become more aware of your vision. Like notice those things, like notice what makes your vision better. A lot of people say being out in nature, when I'm on vacation, when there's better light. And most people say, my vision is worse when I'm on screens all day or, stuff like that. And then I get more curious. So like, for instance, I give my example, like I'm a creative, my background is creativity. So I'm not like a spreadsheet person, right? So when I used to do my own bookkeeping, I was looking at that. I'm like, oh, and not just because, let's say, money wasn't good or whatever. I just it's like what Dr. Bates called it pessimum. I'm looking at something I really don't want to look at. And for most people, it's an eye chart is a clear pessimum. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh, versus looking at a loved one or looking at a beautiful flower or something. So getting more in tune with like, what do you notice? Like what makes your vision better and what makes it worse? And once you understand that, you can then actively help yourself. And I had one client, I give you an example, how when you get more intricate, she said, going into the garden makes my vision worse. I'm like, what? Like, I've never heard that. Usually people say gardens. But all I see is all the weeds and all the work I have to do, and it just overwhelms me. You know what I mean? So getting more in touch of those strains and gains, and then you can start using that and becoming more aware. And maybe when you have to do a task, either outsource it like I did with bookkeeping, or just give yourself, like maybe rest your eyes, take a few deep breaths and be like, I can do this, kind of like prepare yourself mentally a little bit for doing this thing that you really don't like doing. Or if your computer is causing you more vision problems, have it like me. I just have to move my eyes 1 inch above the screen, and I'm looking far in the distance. So make it easy for yourself to kind of get out of that, screen mode.
Very interesting. Okay, let's move on to light. You had mentioned that as well. Sunlight, being outside. A lot of people wear sunglasses when they're outside, and this is a cultural norm now. So in your opinion, should we be wearing sunglasses outside or should we not be wearing them?
I would say no, but I do want to make a big disclaimer because this is always the topic where, so if, first of all, I want to say, like you had the atrophy in your eyes, right? Your pupils were hugely dilated. You do not want to go out in bright sunlight like that, because we have built-in sunglasses in our eyes called pupils, right? They get very tiny when it's bright and they open up wide when it's dark. But let's say you take drugs that dilate your pupils, or let's say you have a disease where your pupils, there is such thing where your pupils don't constrict. Like David Bowie had one pupil that was always like really right, one of his eyes. So in that case, it's really important, because then, nature intended for the pupil to be tiny when you're outside. So those are certain eye diseases. So, or if you're in extreme conditions like skiing and it's bright sunlight and it's all white. So in those cases, I would definitely advise wearing sunglasses. But when it comes to your day-to-day life, right? And for me, as an example, I was so light sensitive. I wore sunglasses on overcast days in LA. I would never go outside. And that made my vision worse. And also my night vision was affected by that, because if you can't tolerate bright light, the driving at night, right? The oncoming traffic, and then those SUVs with those xenon bright, super bright headlights. And then here's the thing, if you wear sunglasses all the time, like I did, and they're dark, your pupils never practice. The pupillary reaction gets very sluggish because your pupils never practice opening and closing, right? Mm-hmm. And so then in traffic, you get blinded by that headlight, and then it takes way too long for the pupils to open up, or vice versa, right? So once I stopped wearing sunglasses, my night driving is not a problem at all. So that, and I heard that from many of my clients too. And also, like again, we also have different light sensitivity regardless of refractive errors. So some people with blue eyes or Northern European like me might be a little bit more light sensitive than somebody, born in Africa near the equator. So there is definitely a little bit of a range, but you want to get to the point where in your normal habitat, so to speak, that you're not, light sensitive or squinting, or that you need to put sunglasses on. If anything, I recommend wearing a hat. Sometimes it's the angle of the sun. It's just a weird angle. Or, you at the beach, I always wear a cap or a hat, especially if you play like certain games, so that can be helpful. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, great. I got a question for you. When I was young, I would for some reason, my dad would drive us to school and I would sit in the back seat and I would stare at the sun for, I don't know, a couple of minutes at a time. And it wasn't too late. It was still early morning, I think 7:30 a.m. or probably around 8, but it wasn't too late. And so I was like, oh, I can stare at the sun for 2 minutes. I'm a tough guy. And so is that recommended for people to stare at the sun with their eyes or no?
This is I know people do sun gazing where they stare at the sun, or like in yoga, that is tabaka. I always mess it up. But the candle gazing where you stare at the candle, I am not a fan of staring in any shape or form because we want that blinking. But what I do myself, and not every day because it depends on my day, but I like when the sun just comes over the horizon and sometimes you even have like a tree obscuring it. Mm-hmm. I like to look at the sun, but then I blink a lot. So I blink rapidly when I'm doing that. And sometimes I cover one eye and the other eye. And if you do that, you might notice that the eye with the bigger vision problem is more sensitive to the sun. And so it's a great way to reduce light sensitivity, but that's not how I would start. I would definitely start with closed eye sunning where we face the sun with the closed eyelids. And sometimes even that is too bright for people. You could do it in dappled light under a tree. But yeah, I'm not a fan of staring at the sun, but I think it's okay to look at the sun as long as you blink rapidly and you don't feel strain. Like if your eyes are tearing and you're like squinting, then that's not something, then you have to either build up to that or you never do it. That would be my recommendation.
I got you. So great. Thank you. So you were talking about sunning, meaning exposing your eyes to the sun so they get used to dilation and then opening up again, or opening up and then closing up again.
Right.
What is a good exercise? You said just do it, close your eyes when there's sun outside and
so I can demonstrate this. And for those of you listening, so imagine the sun is like straight in front of me. And then I'm closing my eyes and I'm turning, and I'd like to do it on the exhale. I turn my head to the side. So now I'm turning, going to the left, and the left eye is kind of in the shadow, right? So the pupil, even after the closed eyelid, behind the closed eyelid, is going to be a little bit wider open. And then I inhale, I turn back to center, and then I exhale and I go to the other side. So now my right eye is a little bit in the shadow, and the pupil opens just a little bit. And so you go back and forth. First of all, this relaxes your neck. Neck tension, we haven't even talked about physical tension, but neck tension affects your vision. So you relax your neck, you create more range of motion, you get more blood flowing into your brain, and it's really relaxing, and you can do it really slow. And if that feels good, then you can maybe blink the eyes open as you're on the side. And then as you go to the center, you close your eyes again, and then you can open them on the side. And then, there's additional techniques like advancing from there on. But that's a way to get started in a safe way that's relaxing. And maybe depending on where you live, you do it early in the morning. I mean, I can look at the sun at noon, but I don't really like to do it, to be honest. I do the sunning in the middle of the day, but I don't look at the sun. I don't tilt my head back and look at the sun. I just have my head straight. So you don't have to tilt your head backwards. You can just keep it straight.
Gotcha. So that's a simple exercise that anybody can do. How long do you do that for every day?
I mean, I know some people want these exact instructions. I always say do it as long as it feels good. I mean, you can do a couple minutes. I like to combine it with palming, what you called or referred to as cupping before we recorded. So the cupping is like when you use your hands, the palms of your hands, and you cover your closed eyes. And so think of the sunning as a treatment or nourishment for your cone cells. Remember that cells that see sharp and have color vision. And then the palming, where you cover your closed eyes with your cupped hands, is a way to nourish your rod cells so that your optic nerve can relax and the rod cells get replenished with that rhodopsin in darkness. So it's a really nice way. And you can either do sunning and then do palming afterwards, and maybe go inside and do some palming. Or you can do those sandwiches, right? Where you do you sun a little bit for maybe 30 seconds and you do some palming. So you can alternate it as well. And I had a client early on that was one of my very first clients who was in his 60s back then. And he lived in Brentwood, and he would do like half an hour every morning, every night. He had a rooftop garden, and he would just do that. I taught him lots of other things, but he would only do sunning and palming. And that helped him tremendously. And he would do it alternating, where he would do a little bit of sunning, a little bit of palming, but the mind is the key piece here. So instead of minutes and setting a timer, if you answer, you're like, oh God, I have all this other stuff to do, and how much more longer? that's not going to help you because then you're not relaxed. So it's really about, especially with palming, it's like you want to bring your mind into like what I call like a little mini vacation. You want to have a memory or bring something up in your mind that's easy, effortless, that just makes you go, just, because if your mind is thinking about your shopping or what this friend said to you or whatever, that's not relaxing. So it's really not just a physical practice, it's really also even more a mental practice.
Okay, got it. You talked about mental practice and stress and how it relates to eyes, but also you just touched on the physical attributes or the physical relaxation of your body and how important that can be because muscles are usually tense and we hold tension in different parts of the body. So how important is that for the relaxation piece, the physical, the muscles?
Both is important. So in the Bates method, people really misunderstand the Bates method. They always talk about it's not eye exercises at all. Yes, maybe some of the practices like Sunny, you can call that an exercise, but to me, that's like habits or vision practice or technique to get you to get to a result. Eye exercise that are done mechanically, where you just roll your eyes. Yes, it doesn't hurt you because you still get movement and you get some relaxation or some stretching in the muscles, but that's not. We want to learn how to see naturally well, right? So the mental aspect is immensely important. But if you have a tight, like I didn't even notice, here's a story. So I was going through that divorce I mentioned earlier, right? And I had a Day of the Dead party, that was kind of Halloween. That was also celebrating my divorce. I didn't know back then that the divorce wasn't finished yet. But long story short, so I had this massage therapist. She was like sitting, kind of massaging me. She's like, "Oh my God, your jaw is like concrete." And I was like, what? Like I had no sensation in I didn't even notice. Mm-hmm. Now I'm so hyper aware. I immediately noticed when my jaw felt tight, but to me that was normal. Like it was just normal. Like also my stomach area my solar plexus area was always frozen. I realized I hold my tension, my physical stress or my mental stress in my jaw and my stomach. So physical, and especially if you hold tension in your stomach, your diaphragm is not moving. All you do is chest breathing, which is something that you do anyway when you're stressed, which nervous system, wants us to be able to run and fight. And so we just breathe into the chest, which is great when we actually are in danger. But when it comes to sitting at our desk, we want to be more in that relaxation, that belly breath that tells our nervous system it's okay, you're safe, you're relaxed. That's the only time you have peripheral vision. So basically, you know what I mean? Does that make sense? So you have to. I didn't even know I was holding my breath. I didn't even know how to do belly breath. I couldn't even, so, and I have a lot of clients that I work with here in person that I had to teach them that we had to teach their body how to relax. And if your diaphragm doesn't move properly, you don't breathe properly, your brain needs most of the oxygen, the eyes especially, you don't get enough blood flow, lymph doesn't drain. So the whole circulation, but you can't separate the mind from the body. Because if the mind is going 180 miles per hour, your body is not going to be relaxed. Your body is getting ready to do something or be on a racetrack or something,
Totally, yeah. Okay, so great. So thank you for clarifying all of that. Now, when people might think about, working with the Bates method or using or helping or working with a coach in the Bates method to help them regain their perfect vision, let's say it's 20/20 that they want. Are there more exercises that they do, or is this the cupping and the sunning? Is that mostly it? Like what actually happens and how does the process go?
There's a whole lot more. So it really depends on the situation. So light and rest is, two of the aspects we talked about, sunning and palming, but then movement is really important. So a healthy eye makes these super fast saccadic eye movements that it basically little jumps that the eyes make, right? And an eye with poor vision tends to stare, where you try to see like a big area clear at once. And I mentioned earlier, only the phobias that pin-size perfect vision. It doesn't mean that you don't see anything else, but the further away you get from that focal point that you're looking at, the blurrier, maybe not blurry is not the right word, but you see it worse basically. So if you look at my right eye, this is my right eye. If you look at my right eye here, if you watch, or if you're listening, look at something in your environment. Look at that point and notice that everything else is not as perfectly seen. And if you want to see another object, you have to move your attention, you have to move your focus to that other point. And so people with poor vision try to see, let's say, a whole face clear at once, when in reality, you can only see like, even part of one eye clearly at once, and you have to move your attention. So a lot of the movement practices are keys of that. Fusion, which is how your eyes work together, right? Especially with strabismus, amblyopia, double vision, those aspects. So we have to work with fusion. We have to practice with the eyes working together, which is nowadays monovision has become popular in Lasik and cataract surgery, or with contacts where one eye is far, one eye is near. Your eyes never work together. That means you have no depth perception or very weak depth perception, which leads to more falls as you get older. And when you get older, the risk of hip fractures and things not healing is also higher. So depth perception is another aspect that we work on. And then we really work on the memory and imagination. We work on that mental aspect of vision and being in the present moment, because we can only see in the present moment. Everything else is foresight, imagination, visualization, or hindsight, or memory, right? But we only see in the present moment. And a lot of people's mind is never in the present moment. And I mean, there's so much more, right? So it depends on the situation, but it's really about the relaxation and not making an effort to see. Just like when you hear, are your ears popping out of your head? Are you like, no, you just receive the information, but also sometimes we don't pay attention or we do something else. And then you're like, oh, what did you just say? The sound waves hit our ears, or the light waves hit our eyes or the retina, but we don't pay attention because we are somewhere else in our head. So yeah, there's a lot more to it, but the mental aspect, I would say, is about 90% of the vision improvement. So it's really not eye exercise. If anything, it's more mind games.
Wow. And so just those mind games and those couple of eye exercises and mostly mind games and relaxation is able to restore your vision back to, on a permanent basis, back to maybe 2020, huh?
Yeah, here's what I say. First of all, I can never promise anything. I don't know your situation. I don't know. I can teach you something, but you have to make it work for yourself. I can't be like, okay, Faraz, relax, come on, relax. And sometimes I've seen clients that were excessively practicing for hours each day and didn't see any results. And it's more like, I'll give you an example. So noticing, so when we move our bodies, or it doesn't matter if we jump up and down, if we walk forward, if we just sway side to side, the world moves oppositionally from us, right? This is a fact that a lot of people with poor vision don't get initially. Everybody with good vision, you have them sway, shift side to side, and they're like, yeah, of course, everything shifts oppositionally. Now, when you just move your eyes, like when you're reading a little something, there's also that apparent, it's a visual illusion that things move the opposite way, but you might not see it. And I couldn't see it. I was in my teacher training. I didn't see it. I was so frustrated. I practiced, and the more you force it, nothing happens. And then I did my teacher training in England. So after the training, I was spending an extra day in London, and I was at the store, and there was a sale. There was this little tray that had these lines on it. And I was just looking at the tray. I didn't even like it. Beautiful. I didn't like the design. And I was like, oh my God, the lines are moving. I was so excited. Everybody looked at me in the store like I was crazy. But I knew that concept at that point, and I gave up. I kind of didn't force, I didn't practice so hard. And then suddenly I saw it. It was like, it was letting go.
Yeah.
So sometimes you can over practice. And to me, it's really like blinking, right? Initially, I had stickers on my computer. Every time I was driving, I was practicing blinking. And now it's a habit. I cannot not blink. You know what I mean? So it's really about habits. And my message is everyone can improve. But does it mean like you've been wearing glasses for 60 years and now, minus 10 diopters? No, very likely you not have a chance to go back to 2020. However, you can make improvements and you can lower your diopters, and lower your diopters, the lower your risk for macular degeneration. And many of the eye diseases that, that we call age-related are really based on lifestyle, on habits. We haven't talked about diet much, or toxins, chemical exposure, EMFs, like basically there's all this stuff that catches up with us after decades of abuse, maybe drinking too much alcohol, eating, the sad diet, all these kind of things. Eventually, there is going to be consequences. And that's when we call them the age-related eye diseases, which are really, really not age-related. They're just accumulation of bad things that happen. Diet, toxins, we didn't talk about trauma yet. Trauma, like there's so many factors. It's like that toxic cocktail at some point that produces diabetes, heart disease, vision problems. It's, yeah.
Totally. So the problems that precede all of the big diseases in lifestyle also affect the eyesight. And whatever ages the rest of your body or causes diseases somewhere else can also affect the eyesight. So, okay, that's fair. In this podcast, we talk about a lot of those things that people should avoid, the toxins. We recently talked about trauma as well. So I totally understand where you're going with that. Now, how, and this is a question that I have to ask, but how many hours does somebody need to practice if they're working with yourself or somebody else? And how many weeks or months does it take for them to see improvements in vision?
So, I mean, I had clients have improvement immediately in the first session. And I also had other clients where it took a little longer. I don't say hours, but I want you to become aware. First of all, become more aware. Like, for instance, cupping or palming, right? You can use that after you feel eye strain. You can be like, oh, my eyes are strained. Instead of putting stronger glasses on, maybe I give my eyes a break. Or you can do it preventively, and you just know after lunch, my eyes get tired. Like, so you can preventively do some palming. Or you can you notice, like, for instance, when I started in the morning, my eyes were really like fresh and lubricated. I palmed for like a minute and my eyes felt like super fresh. Because night, we didn't talk about that either, but sleep is not always restful. But in the evening, I was on the computer all day. In the evening, it took me 30 minutes. And after 30 minutes, my eyes didn't even feel, they felt better, way better, but they didn't feel as good as in the morning. So I was like, okay, what am I doing in the afternoon? Like, how can I, like, maybe I go outside a little bit, maybe I do. So I want you to become more aware, because I had a client, I'll give you an example. Like, he would come back to me after 2 weeks. He's like, I did 100 swings. We did it's called the long swing. I did 100 swings every morning, for 7 minutes, whatever. And I'm like, well, how did your eyes feel after doing that? And he's like, oh, I wasn't paying attention to that. I'm like, and he is a fitness trainer. And so he was very used to like so many reps and you do this and that. I'm like, well, this is the whole point. Like, the exercise is designed to kind of improve your saccadic eye movements and to make your eyes feel like nimble, like they're like a ball bearing that moves effortlessly and easy. And, you should feel like it should feel relaxing. Or when you do the palming, it should be really black versus like gray and, and he wasn't paying attention to that. He did it mechanically. That's why I give exact protocols, but I also want everybody to be very aware of what their vision is and how their eyes feel. And the other thing is, expectations are, that we talk about, expectations are the thief of joy, but also expectations can put that pressure on you that you're like, oh, if I palm an hour every day, whatever, then my vision should be one diopter better. And it doesn't work that way, because then you put pressure on yourself. So I like the yogic principle of aparigraha, non-attachment. You do the practices, you go with it, you sit with it, but you don't expect to do it like 3 times and then you see a result, or 6 times to see a result. And it doesn't mean that you don't have goals, but it means that you are just willing to do this and sit with it and practice this until you accomplish that. And then relaxation is a journey for some people. I remember I had one of my first clients too. She had -9 diopters and she sat there palming and she's like, I can't relax. I don't know how to relax. This is stressful for me. I'm like, okay, let's not do palming, because palming, there's no point. So we walked on the trampoline, we did movement. We played on a loud song, we danced, like we got into like, how can you get into that moment where you feel good, where you feel excited, where you feel relaxed? And that can mean many different things for many different people. So, you know what I mean? That's why I don't like these strict exercise regimes, even though I do give my private and my clients and my students in my courses, I give them a protocol, but I also tell them, be really aware if that works for you. Don't be rigid about it, right?
Yeah, makes sense. And for you to see people, do you need to see them in person, or can you see them over Zoom or via Zoom as well?
I used to only do in-person sessions, and then I realized I'm really limiting. There's so many people that need my help, and so I switched to online. And I basically, I have small group coaching program called Naturally Clear Vision Mentorship that has private coaching, but I don't even see private clients anymore. And if somebody lives in LA, and yes, we can definitely do a local session, but usually I would say 99.5% or 99.9% of my work is online now.
Okay, where is that? What's the URL?
So my website is myholisticvision.com. So when you go to myholisticvision.com, you find link to all my programs. I have lots of free resources. I'm on Instagram. I'm on YouTube. And I also have, I don't know when this podcast comes out, but I have a free 5-day training and everything. You can find everything on my website.
Fantastic. So check out the website. Also check out Instagram. I'm sure you're talking about it. And Instagram is a very visual platform as well. So I'm sure you're talking about this. And then I was binge watching a bunch of your YouTube videos recently. So there's a lot of gold in those videos too. I saw you doing the sunning and then going back and forth. So I was like, I could incorporate some of these techniques. So thank you very much, Claudia, for coming on the Anti-Aging Hack Show. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me.